All right, like I said, shallow cranking, and I'll just get right into the juice. The rod is your main deal when you start throwing a crankbait. Like Gerald was talking about earlier, even with the bigger crankbaits, they've built the rods now, the glass rods that have the parabolic bend in them. And the reason, I get asked on social media a lot, why you like the parabolic bend? It's just because you're using treble hooks, and when you're cranking, you want that fish to be able to bite that bait and you're not immediately ripping it out of his mouth. So that rod lets the fish load up on the bait before you're totally snatching it out of his mouth. And it really didn't, I didn't know if it even made sense to me or not, but of course Kevin Van Dam was doing it, so heck, I thought I would try it too. So, and it works. I mean, it works. And this rod here is the one I use the most. This is the St. Croix 610 medium heavy legend glass. I think it's like a $200 something rod. It's an expensive rod, but it is so sensitive when cranking that it's worth it to me, because when you're cranking shallow, there's all the time, there's limbs, there's sticks, leaves. A lot of time in the fall, there's leaves on top of the water, leaves that's floating under the water. So you want a rod where when you're cranking, you can feel when your bait gets fouled up. So some glass rods you get, when you start making them out of fiberglass, they're not as sensitive as graphite. So this one's mixed, graphite and fiberglass both. So it's got a real sensitive feel to it when you're cranking. Like, example, this year on Martin, or I guess last year, the Elite Series tournament on Martin has a ton of silk and stuff on the bottom. So when you're cranking, you're constantly hitting that stuff. So you want to be able to feel, you want a rod that you can actually feel when you get your bait fouled up when you're cranking. So like I said, a lot of glass rods, you can't really feel that good with it. And when you're just cranking, and if you cranked it all the way back in, and then you got a bit of a black leaf about that long in front of your bill, I mean, it just gets on your nerves. So get you a rod that you can feel really well with, and when your bait is not doing exactly what you want it to do, then you'll feel it, and you can just give it the old-fashioned twitch and get the leaf to come off of it 90% of the time. So that's that's my first part of the slide there. The number one piece is the rod. And like I said, this Legend Glass, St. Croix made it. I've used every cranking rod out there that I know of, and I can honestly say this is my favorite one. It's light. I mean, it's a lot. I'll let y'all feel it here in a little bit. You need to come up and feel how light this rod is. The real, and another reason you want it light is when you're cranking, you're making tons of casts. So if you got a real light rod, 610, so it's not long, it's real light, and that's what you run into a lot of times with glass rods too. They're a lot heavier. So they got this one perfect. The weight of it, I mean, I just love it. I don't know how else to say it. I just love it. I mean, you can tell I've used this one a ton. Used it yesterday when I was fishing on Smith. But the reel I use is always just a 6.4. When I'm shallow cranking, 6.4 to 1 gear ratio reel. And a lot of times people say you want a faster one for shallow cranking. I've come to learn that the 6.4 to 1 is perfect. So because you can speed it up and you can slow it down. A lot of times, if you get to cranking in the spring or early spring when the water's 50 degrees, you're going to have to slow your reel down. So if you're using an 8 to 1 and you get to catching one, and then the next cast you jacked up and you're reeling and you may not catch another one. So you just use a 6.4 to 1. That's what I just use across the board. I don't hardly ever change it. That way if I have to slow down, I can slow it down. If I need to speed it up, I can speed it up, so you can go both ways with it. And if you use a 5 to 1, I just can't get the square bill to go deep enough. Like, it feels like I'm just working too hard to get it. So 6.4 to 1, I just got it down to where it's like it feels perfect to me. Like, I just got used to it, and I feel like that's the best one. And we'll just go through the complete setup before we get started on the time of year and stuff. The line I use, 12 to 20 pound Seaguar BrazeX. Seaguar makes a BrazeX. It's for when your line is running across stuff. So of course, when you're shallow cranking, you want your crankbait to hit stuff, so your line's going to be hitting it before your bait does. So I like the BrazeX because it handles a little bit more abuse. Line size, the size of it, 12 to 20 pound. 90% of the time I throw 12 because I want my square bill to go as deep as it can. But the time I would change it would be if I'm fishing like riprap and I'm having to burn it into the riprap, like just burn it. Rocks destroy line. There's no question about it. It didn't matter what kind of line you use, rocks are going to destroy it. So if you're having to use 12 to get your bait down there, when you're hitting them rocks, it's just tearing it up. So you're either going to have to retie a lot or go up to 15. So I'll try 15 and try to make longer casts and try to get the bait down, because if you're fishing riprap, usually you can make some long casts. and fishing rock. So I'll go up to 15 every now and then. And then the only time I ever go to 20 is like if I don't want my square bill to dive deep. So if I'm cranking in 2 foot and I still want to use like a 1.5, you know, a crankbait that goes 4 to 6 foot, and I want the bait to stay in 2 to 3, I'll go up to 20. And it also dulls down the action of your bait too. So if you feel like you don't need a bunch of action, and you only have a certain amount of baits, like when I growing up, I didn't have maybe 2 or 3 styles of crankbait, so you had to make each crankbait do 2 or 3 different things. That's what I had to do. So I still do it today. I mean, even on the Elite Series, I still, whatever I can do, you know, just something a little different. So when you use that 20-pound test, it'll make a flat-sided crankbait even be more subtle.
It's Mike Iaconelli. This is Bass U TV.
Here's what's awesome about Bass U TV.
You get the top instructors.
Real tools that help you catch more fish consistently.
And that's why you want to check out Bass U TV.
Join the Bass U family.
Welcome to Bass U TV.